Welcome back to the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. And Donald Goines is considered the godfather of ghetto realism. He wrote fantastical stories based on the realities and struggles of living in urban spaces and among vulnerable Black communities. Goines, born in Detroit in 1936, grew up during a time when the world was heading into another world war, World War II. He joined the military at just 16 years old and fell into the world of heroin. He ended up in prison for drugs after returning from the war, and once released, he turned things around and wrote 16 books in 4.5 years before he was murdered alongside his wife Shirley in Highland Park.
Tia, almost 50 years later, the murders remain a mystery, but Goines' story is being revisited with the help of the film company Detroit Sun. Craig Gore is the executive producer of the documentary, which explores the life and death of Donald Goines. The film also highlights his contributions to hip-hop culture after his death. Robert Tate Bailey is the founder of King Tate Productions. He's also the author of The Hustle Code, a guide on how to change perspectives and circumstances with empowering messages. Robert has been documenting the story of Goines. Robert and Craig, welcome to the Metro.
Thanks for having us, Tia and Robin.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Craig, I want to start with you. Who was Donald Goines? Talk about his life a little bit. We know he was in the military, that he had problems with drugs, but he was so much more than those things.
Yeah, of course he was. His story is really fascinating because he came from a middle-class Black family who owned dry cleaners in Detroit. And, and he kind of could have, lived a maybe an easier life. But we were talking about this last night with Tape, is that he was really looking for adventure, and he joined he was curious about the world and just wasn't going to settle for that. So he joined the military when he was 15 and a half with a fake birth certificate. And by the time he was 16, he's on the front lines in Korea. He was an ambulance driver picking up dead bodies, saw the carnage, got hooked on heroin in the war, and came back, and then and then he got into a life of crime, did pimping for a while, drug dealing, went to jail for a robbery to buy heroin. And while he was in prison in 1970, he read the book Pimp by Iceberg Slim, which had just come out. And that inspired, he was like, wow, it was really raw and real. And I think it was the first best-selling book that outside of the Black community, you got to see this kind of street culture. Housewives read it, and it was like, wow. So it was a big thing. And Donald was inspired by that and started writing down his own experiences. And while he was still in prison in 1970, he sent some sample chapters to Holloway House, who was the publisher of Iceberg Slim, and they accepted his novel. And when he got out, he changed his life. And as you guys said, from 1970 to 1974. He wrote 16 books. It is amazing, his productivity and his imagination.
And Robert, bringing you into the conversation, can we talk a little bit about author Donald Goines and the kind of topics that he covered, and if it inspired you at all as an author?
Yes. Thanks for having me again. Yes. He inspired me as an author, especially from being from Detroit, because I'm from Detroit, from the east side. Grew up over there and ran the streets, did prison time. That's where I first got introduced to Donald Goines. And that's kind of like a tradition, like for youngsters that go into prison, you're first handed a Donald Goines book. So these are the first books that we're even reading, some people even in life. And so that's what inspired me to be an author. But his works, how he was so he was so detailed, graphic and detailed. And so that inspired me to go on in music, to project, my lifestyle, to be graphic and music and with my novel. Yeah, authentic with my novel as well that I just published myself. And I think with his story, he deserved to be recognized, you know what I'm saying? And have his place in American history solidified.
That was actually going to be one of my follow-ups, Robert. I was going to talk about his legacy there and the importance of his legacy, especially as you said, that's the first time that some folks are even opening a book and reading a actual novel book, a book with chapters.
That's right.
Can you both go into that? Oh, we're going to start with you, Robert, of course, being a man who was handed that Goines book as you walked through those doors and how it changed you as you walked out. And then, Craig, we're going to bring you in as well.
Sure.
So, Robert, you
Sure.
first.
So what's so interesting about this, and that's why I'm so excited to be able to do this project, because I'm also an executive producer on this project along with Craig Gore. And it's like I've watched documentaries on him before, or, people have tried to do things before, and they still haven't, shed the correct light on his life. From talking to his daughter, we are close friends with his daughter, whom was in the house when the murders actually occurred. And just talking to her and learning different things amongst the family, and with Eddie Jackson Jr., he studied and published the book, The Low Road. Like, just learning so much about him and how inspiring he was to everybody, and how he could just get into these creative spaces and write so detailed that his legacy, his story has to be told. So it's like a goal for me now to make sure that his story gets the true light that it needs to have, because this is a true icon of Detroit history.
Yeah.
Craig?
Well, yes. Yeah. I'll just like Tape, I went to prison when I was 18. I was a car thief. And there was like there's old Westerns from Louis L'Amour and Stephen King, and there was Donald Goines. And then when I was, in jail, I read all his stuff. And then when I was shipped to prison, I became a librarian. Oh, wow. So when I got out, I just did, 2 years. I got out, and it inspired me. I was on parole, and I was in North Carolina, and I said, I got to get out of here. I'm going to go down the tubes, and all my friends are doing bad things. So I ended up moving to Chicago and going to Columbia College Chicago, and I got a degree in fiction writing and a minor in poetry. And then I moved to LA and became successful as a screenwriter. But Donald Goines was always on my shelf. All his books, I would reread them every few years. And then Eddie Allen's book, the biography, came out in 2005, and I read that. So those books were on my shelf. So during the writer's strike 2 years ago, I couldn't write any scripts, and me and Tape looked it up, and there was no proper full-length documentary about Donald Goines. And so we were like, wow, let's go back to Detroit and start this thing. And we met the biographer, we met Donna. We hired a private investigator, Bill Proctor, who's great, just to start looking into the unsolved murder. Because, 50 years later, the gangsters and the people who did it are probably dead, but maybe someone will talk. Yeah. So that's what got us back interested in it. We just couldn't believe there was not a doc about him. And as you know, Nas, 50 Cent, Snoop, all kinds of big rappers, Tupac, they mentioning Goines in their lyrics, and also big writers, James Ellroy, Walter Mosley, novelists, people look up to Goines too, his whole legacy. And he sold 20 million copies of his books, and most of them in jails and prisons. So that his legacy as far as like teaching literacy is really large, but it's unknown to most of the public.
And so we have about 30 seconds left. We got there quick. We were talking and having a good conversation. Yeah. So I do want to just get to really quickly the documentary itself. Where are we at with the process in the documentary? This is to both you, Robert, and Craig. Robert, we're going to start with you, and we're going to transition to Craig. So where are we with the documentary?
Well, with the documentary right now, we're building a foundation for it. That's why we put out the $5,000 reward. We want to put that out there. With the phone number 586-873-1371. But right now we have other Hollywood companies that are coming in to help us really lock this thing down and make it a real thing.
Yeah.
Yes. So what we started with is the murder investigation with Bill Proctor in Detroit. We have a dedicated cameraman and everyone there. So we need to get that started, and then we're just setting up all the interviews with rappers, writers, and the scholars. There's a scholar at Rutgers University that teaches a class in Goines. So we'll be filming it over the summer, and we want to release it by the end of the year.
Absolutely.
Craig Gore is the executive producer of the documentary, which will come out hopefully by the end of next year. Robert Tate Bailey is the founder of King Tate Productions. Robert is also an executive producer of the documentary film following the life and death of Donald Goines. I want to say thank you to both of you for joining us on the Metro. We will chat with you soon.
Thank you, Tia Robin.
Coming up, Arab Americans in Southeast Michigan hold a lot of political power. But what party can truly speak to their needs? We'll dig into that next. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. And this is The Metro. Stay with us.